Everything in the house I built except a couple of things. Fancy veneer, I didn't know what to do with it. It was sitting in my shop, sandwiched between a couple of things to keep it flat, and decided that I wanted to make glass rods, which are in slots
Oh yeah.
on top, so the whole thing can move.
It's a beautiful design.
Yeah, that's.
I like that lower shelf on it.
Yeah.
What do you mean on the pattern set?
No,
Yeah.
that's left over veneer, slipped underneath your arm of a chair, so that when you sit down, you can put your drink and your chips and such. In the old days, when people had gout, they wanted to keep their feet up.
Really?
It's called a gout stool.
That's not a bad idea.
A gout stool? That's fun.
Says he's in.
But you might want to visit their studio.
These are so pretty right now.
Oh, he's so proud of himself, too. Want to go look at some pretty flowers?
Having the bird bath there is really lovely because we can sit here and very close and watch them come in for a bath or a drink.
Yeah. Is that a bluebird, is it? Oh,
Hard to see the color.
Yeah,
You
got
can
it.
see a little bit.
Have a look.
Oh yeah. Never seen him bird like that before. I wonder what it is.
So, here we are set up to do a small watercolour this morning. Well, I have a little time to spare this morning, and I took this picture of this cardinal earlier on with the 600mm lens. It's not that sharp. I've lost a bit of the eye detail as well in that print, but I'm going to have a go at it just for fun because we've already done a couple of flower scenes, landscapes and all sorts of other things with figures. So let's have a go at a little bit of wildlife this time, just in watercolour. Use a knot paper today, and the only brush I'm going to need, and the main brush I'm going to need, is just a simple little round. This one's a number 10, and I want to concentrate on these detailed areas and then go looser around it with wet into wet afterwards. Now, we've got to start in watercolour with the lightest colours first. So in this case, I want to be dropping in very light yellow. I think we're going to be starting with a chrome in this one. Very light chrome. Keep it clean. A little bit of aureolin first and some chrome, because this paper is very waxy. I'm going to have to work it in a bit. The paint seems to be a bit mucky as well. I'm not very keen on that. Because it's been tilted in the car, I think. The pencil's coming off into it as well a bit. So, not a very good start. I wanted much cleaner colours, but anyway, here we go. Now I can drop in my chrome. I've got the wet effects to make this much richer yellow. It's a little bit filthy, but cleaner colour down here. And quite often, as with Impressionism, if we're doing broken colour, that's one colour next to another. Also in watercolour, sometimes dropping a colour in to another colour can be much brighter than mixing the two and then putting them on. So here I'm going to cover this bird in this chrome. Then I want soft fluffy effects, and we'll show you how to use a fan brush later as well for getting some furry effects, some feathery effects on here. Going down now to cadmium orange, painting it fairly thickly today. So quite quickly, cadmium orange into this now. Let's see how quickly we can establish a bird like this. I don't think I could paint it quite as fast outdoors. I admire these wildlife artists that do that. Down the bottom edge of that tail there. A bit more orange here. I really do want to capture the richness of these oranges and yellows into this. Up through here, into his cheek. And right round the breast. Then we're going to play with warm and cool reds a bit. We've got the lighter cadmium reds here, and also the rose colours. Let's first lift out a bit where these feathers are here. I want to lift out a little bit because I want it greyer here later. So I'm going to lift out a bit of paint there and across the wing here. I want it bluer in those places. I could have left it before, but you see how easy it is to lift out the paint now? And a little bit here as well. I want it a bit bluer there. We'll lift out a bit of that yellow there. Just by drying the brush, cleaning and drying the brush, and then sucking the paint out of those places. There we are. A little bit more on the back as well, a bit bluer there. Suck the paint out, back to the paper again. That's the way. So it's almost back to the white paper there. So if you make a mistake in watercolour, you can lift it out like that. Right, let's come down now to our brighter reds with some light red here. So I want a more orangey red. Not quite that bright, but there we go. To there. Lovely bit of bright red along this wing here. And down the edge of the tail there, that's better, it's cleaner. A little bit of red around here. A bit blue around there as well. It's the pencil marks today that are doing this, making it rather bit of red coming into. So this is an orangey red that I want. Before I start putting in the slightly cooler reds, just letting the wet into wet do the job. And I want to keep it nice and clean. All the way around here. Nice bright cardinal red. And letting the wet into wet just softly work down the feathers. Giving that fluffy effect. Now I need to lift out again, here on the leg. Don't want any red just there. That away. And come in with a cooler red. Let's look at the rose now, under the belly here. Much cooler, maybe even a little bit of alizarin crimson coming in here. So rose, alizarin crimson, both very cool reds that will give me this lovely dark colour underneath the tail. Try and do this before it dries. Over the back of the wing here. And I'm doing this while it's all wet. And I'll put the details in a bit later because I will want to get further effects into here. So this cooler, rich, slightly more purpley red, this deep red, which will make the other red seem even lighter. Just start to get some of the fluffy effects. A little bit around these edges. Now go darker still, going down to a purple now. Right into here. So much cooler. We're now in between the blues and the reds by doing a purple. Look at these lovely effects we can get with these, playing with these warm and cools together. And that purple, I've got to work on the beak kit, but that purple also wants to come around the moment into here, into his eye. And I'm going to come back to the blue on there. I want these bluey greys. So I'm going to use a cobalt violet and a little bit of cerulean I'll just tint that with a bit of cobalt violet to bring it down. Same across here. Just down here as well. Quite heavily, very opaquely in this case. And we need that deep purple underneath the wing. Here. The paint is gradually drying off now. So I'll be able to get hard edges shortly. So I'm going to need. You can see that we get the soft effects of the bird first of all. Right, let that dry a little bit. I'm going to come back onto the before that's drying. I'm going to come back onto the beak in a moment. Just want to bring in, feather in this purple just a fraction. Just bring it up and around the leg here. There we go. A little bit more feathery just over the top of the leg, just there. Thin it down a bit. A little bit darker in a moment. Let's just do our basics first. Now back on here. We want the red of the beak. To lift that out a bit there. I want it to be a bit pinker here, so I'm going to try and put back in some of that cobalt violet into there. Just lift that away. Let that red come down over the beak here. We'll tidy it up later. I just want to lift away this area and let it dry a bit, so I can put some cobalt back in there in a moment. Needs to be a little bit bigger, that beak. I'm going to find a brush as well. Let him dry. While he's drying, come back to my cobalt violet. Come down here. As you see, the paper has been handled quite a lot and it's tending to resist. But once you get the paint washed in, it'll be alright. All over this branch. Down here the same. Even though I'm going to paint dark over some of this in a moment, I'm going to put it right through and in. Lovely colours, aren't they? It's so nice to go and take your own bird photographs, because it's easy enough to take them out of books of other people's, but it's quite nice to be able to have your own to actually work from. Now, whilst that's wet, let's go in on the bottom edge of that with some burnt sienna. Like that, just letting it go in with the wet into wet effects. Same here. Don't have to be too careful, we'll just let the controlled accident do the work as we do with watercolour. And then below that we'll take a bit of Prussian blue and add that to the burnt sienna and some foam to the branches. Right down to the bird. Same here. All along that lower edge. Little knots and things that are happening on the branch as well. Let's get those effects in. We don't want to be quite in focus on this. I'm going a little bit out of focus. I'll concentrate on the bird a bit more in a minute and bring that back into focus. Just very dark underneath him here. That whole bit. Bit of purple to go in there in a minute as well. Let those dry off and we put our effects of our branch. So simply, you see. Now it's timing, isn't it? We need to start painting in some of the sharper edges of the foreground leaves. So I'm going to use my Aureolin yellow again, one of my favourite yellows. And start just to paint in. Got to get this working. Right, a thin wash. Just to get this foreground. This resisting of the paper, because it's so old and it's been handled a lot, is going to be a bit of a nuisance in a way, because it's also going to be difficult when I come to do the washes for the background, where I want to be very, very loose, and I shall have a job being loose if I've got to go over it again and again like this. A bit of a nuisance. Take some of that away. Just indicate these lighter areas around here. We're coming with some other greens in a minute. So Aureolin yellow is a lovely lemon yellow, but it's much cool. It's a very cool yellow and much more transparent than the lemon yellow. And I do like a couple of leaves that are further across in the design. I think I'll bring them into here because I quite like those, and I think I'll have them in my design anyway over here. Right, how dry is the bird now? I think hopefully I can come back and take a bit of that cobalt violet and come into the beak here now. Lift out again. It's quite light there. Right down to the tip of the beak. And there. Let that dry off again. Now back onto these leaves. Cerulean blue. And let's start to try and get some of the effects of the slightly bluer, lovely bluer greens. Now these flowers, which have a sort of grey tint, and again it's very hard to get things going in them because of this resistance. I'm going to make a little bit of blue and purple and brown to give us a slightly grey effect, and just blodge it in on the petals here, which I'm hoping to leave behind. So we'll let that dry for a moment. Okay, so this is the stage we've got to. There's our original. Here's what we're working on. And it's still not dry, so I'm still having to wait a little bit, but whilst I'm waiting there are areas that are dry enough to do. And one of those is this dark area on the bib. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to go for a purple and a bit of Prussian to make a very deep, warm blue. Don't want it to spread, so I have to be careful it is in fact dry. Come into there, just around that beak ever so carefully. I'm going to go over it again in a minute, but I just want to get this first dark in the right place. Right down to there. And it's going to come just around the beak here and into the face. And we let that dry off to come back and touch it up in a moment. In the same way we can take that deep purple and the blue, and now it's just dry enough here, we can come down to here and darken in under the wingtip. And just down into here, and even a little bit more where it's required under the detail yet to come. Need to be a lot drier before I do all the detail. A bit darker there. And we'll bring in some indication of feathers there. Now we can start to think about some of the background colours, because we're going to paint a grey, blue-grey area in here and then a warmer wash at the back. So I'm going to change from my round to a mop, because I'm doing slightly larger areas, and mix up a fairly warm green. In this case I'm going to use a bit of yellow ochre and a bit of sap green, and that should give me a nice warm green to go in there. Fairly opaque. We'll just blend that out into that to give a vignette effect. Now back to my cools, some cerulean to drop in around here, plenty of it, right in around the bird, just to give the effect of an out of focus background coming out. Take some of the cobalt violet, drop a little bit of that in between here. A blurry background. Into that, a little bit of cobalt blue, which will show against the warmth of the bird. Green behind the red should look good. A little sap green going in here. Gradually building up these colours, stronger and stronger, darks and lights, one against another, and then we can make some darker colours to take the ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, just want to pile a bit of those deeper colours in. Let those wet into effect, and we let those wet into wet effects dry off a bit now. Just suck out a little bit of light here. Now it's time to start working some of the details. It's still very wet around here, so I can't do much there, but I can work on some of these darks. So I want some very deep. I'll take some Prussian and burnt sienna again, a little touch of purple because it's just always in that bird. And see if I can just tidy up this bit of the beak, make it a bit darker, in and around a bit more and down. Now while we're on textures, take a little bit of light red on this fan brush and just see if we can get a bit of the texturing of the feathers with that. And then come in finally and readjust it. Just the cools here and there, just finish off. And we're almost there with that picture. And I would say that picture is not far off being completed really. So there we go then, a quick study of the cardinal. This time I'm going to do acrylic for a relation of Harry's, and she's very kindly been working on my back and joints because she's a specialist and is able to massage and help my difficulties. So in return as a small gesture really towards all she's done, I'm going to do a painting of her house. And we've got this picture I took this afternoon. She doesn't know yet. But I want to push it a bit further with these colours as well and really make a nice, bright, lively painting out of it. So again, we'll start with a fairly large brush, this one, filled it again. And as usual, work with the sky, the light colours first. And I think this time a little light blue to start with up here, just to get into it. Fairly thinly at first, let's just work up. I can see all my shapes are going to be left behind for the tree here. So at the moment there's a fair bit of water on my brush and I'm just sort of staining the canvas. And then strengthen it just a little with the blue. A little touch of warm, a little touch of the pink, just to start to give it a bit more. Right, having got the blue of the sky done, I've got to think about the clouds. And on the photograph they just bleached out white, as photographs often do. So what I'm going to do is make a very, very light ochre. Take some yellow ochre and white. Paint in the rest of the cloud areas with that first of all. Just basically giving it a staining coat. I want this behind the trees as well because I'm going to let the colour glow through the trees. So yellow ochre and white. See how quickly this paint dries, which is not so good when you're using acrylics and you want to still blend. So I've got to get this colour in quickly before it does completely dry or it's just not going to blend. Now we've got a nice glowing sky going on. We didn't have to use lots of white on that. Having tones just slightly darker allows me to give sparkling colours elsewhere. Right, while I'm at this, I'll come on down to this bit here and I'll use some very similar colours down there just to get going, but perhaps a fraction stronger. It's just to get rid of the white canvas really, just to start to feel these colours. Yellow of the house behind here, which is a bit yellower, so make it a little bit stronger. So let's get a good underpainting of these stronger, vibrant, pretty, sunny spring Appellation pinks and greens and so first of all I just want to block in and find these, get rid of this white. Okay, let's whack in some of these lighter yellowy greens now. What to do is cover this white canvas as quickly as possible with the brush in different directions to get the feeling of these leaves, the canopy of these leaves coming across through here. These greens seem very strong at the moment, but they won't once they get the darker colours and other colours mix in with them. So it's just a preliminary coat to get rid of the white canvas. Right, I'm going to go down a brush size or two by using the edge of the filbert. You can have quite good fun with the branches, and you can go down to a very thin brush straight away. We just press carefully and press more heavily as we come down, and you can finish up with a heavier line. So we can establish quite a lot of our darks at this stage. By flicking that brush around and down here, we can start to get the darks already into the... It's a fairly illustrative piece, and just to indicate those steps there. I'm going to come across some of these darks with the greens anyway, so I'm not over bothered. because I'm going to tint them down a bit. So I can use my brush thinly that way, like this, to make the branches, or thickly like this from the sideways on. Very handy brush. And we'll use a bigger brush for doing the very fine work later on. Just want to get a basic structure now.
Ooh, that's quite nice.
It's different, isn't it?
Yeah. Found out that to go to that Biltmore, it's $65 each.
What?
So I'm assuming you don't want to do that.
I think that's a bit of a rip-off, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I mean, that's ridiculous. Nobody charges that much.
I know.
What do you get for that? A full dinner?
Sure, you get a tour, that's it. Okay.
You see how we can use this green to also glaze over colours. Well, that gives us more of a coherence as well. You can see how now that I've painted the darks over the lights, I'm now going back with the lights to put back in the details of light shining through the trees to be very effective. Nice and loose, and let the eye of the beholder do the work, don't do it all for them as usual. You can see how quickly our painting can build up and look tremendously detailed when really we haven't done a lot of detail. I think all that's left to do now on this is just to put in these finer twigs around the place, just to give a bit more texture to it. So I'll take a number 2 round and just come in with some of these very fine twigs.